out there in Stockholm. Shaun here from Dataiku. Sorry I couldn't make it over this time with travel restrictions, but I do look forward to meeting you at the next event over in the Nordics. I want to talk to you today about how all models are wrong, some are useful, but as you might guess from this question, I don't know if we always know which ones. If anyone can recognize the quote that's sort of embedded in that title, throw it in the comments and the Q&A. I'd love to see if anyone recognizes who I'm riffing on then. So the motivation for this talk, the inspiration was my time as a data scientist and a data science leader, and also time working with at Dataiku with lots of data leaders, chief data officers, and other people. And if you talk to data people and data leaders for long enough about why they are struggling to make change in their organizations, you get some classic reasons. Oh, our culture doesn't just recognize the value of data. It might be, every time I try to explain it, they still don't understand. Or it might just be down to inertia. You know, this company's always made decisions this way, and I just can't cut through that. And the motivation is for this talk is maybe a little contentious, broadcasting, I guess, safely from London into a room of data people in Stockholm. Maybe the problem could be to do with us. And so while I'm talking today, think about this maybe controversial question. How many organizations do you know that are led by data people? I struggle. Not many chief data officers, not many chief technology officers even become chief executive officers. Why could that be? And maybe it's got something to do with the role that we play in organizations and how we see our job. So just keep that in mind as I'm talking, and we'll return to it at the end. So I'll talk to you today about how I see and have experienced personally data science getting stuck when it's searching the organization to try and find value to deliver. I'm going to talk about this really strange relationship that data science has with time. That may be a little bit mind-bending, and then hopefully leave you with some practical advice at the end about how we can change something about ourselves to become better partners and collaborators to the business. So how do we get stuck? And this is, I guess, a cautionary tale about a fable that we use often about a tree that has fruit on it. And let's go after the low-hanging fruit, we all say to each other, to our stakeholders. The problem with the low-hanging fruit metaphor is that the lowest hanging fruit, or the lowest fruit, has actually already fallen off the tree. And so when we as data people come into organizations or move into a new area of the organization, we look for easy problems to solve, right, that are going to have super high value. And so the advice is always, don't reach up to the very top of the tree. Go after that nice, easy fruit that's hanging down at the bottom of the tree. But as the picture shows, sometimes those opportunities to drive value are a little bit of an illusion. And so much of the fruit that was on the tree has fallen off. And speaking to one of my counterparts in the US, he came up with this great way to extend that metaphor. There might be value that we want to deliver, problems that we want to solve that actually looks so enticing and so easy to go after. But the problem is it's already been consumed by someone else. Some other process has got to it. You could call it a parasitic process. And for data people, this is the classic case where looking at a part of the business that a very simple machine learning model could really change the way a whole process works and deliver a ton more value to internal customers, external customers, whoever. But it's currently being done in some other way. And this could be the macro that Steve wrote in 1993 that we're still somehow running. It could be the access databases that our finance people are using to pivot data at scale. It could be almost anything. But many of the areas where we would like to make big impact early on, really launch something amazing. At Dataiku, we call those moonshot projects. And in my personal experience, lots of the moonshot projects that I tried to work on and actually maybe delivered, I didn't recognize that low-hanging fruit that I was going after was low-hanging for a reason. It may have fallen off the tree, and it wasn't actually a good opportunity for me to go after in the first place. Why is that, and what problem does that create for us? So, the low-hanging fruit metaphor, is connected to this value complexity trade-off, and apparently, allegedly, we're all looking for these really low complexity, super high opportunities to make an impact with data and AI in our organizations. But hopefully it's not too controversial to say that those don't exist, or I've not seen them. Or if they do exist, they have been consumed by some other process, or the cost of change makes it too difficult to do. So I don't personally believe that there is a lot of low complexity work that is super high value in and of itself. I think, unfortunately, most of the things that are the highest value will be very complex to do. Doesn't mean that there's not some slightly less valuable things that are very easy to do. But it does mean that if we're looking around for low-hanging fruit in the top left of this graph, that we may have a problem. Someone says there's no sound. I hope that's not true. Maybe your speakers are off. If we look at the yellow bar as well, what we can do, if we're just sort of like adding to this graph, there are a set of use cases, right, that we might be tempted to go after, but where the value that we can get is not actually worth the complexity or the cost. So this is how I like to take the sort of, the standard way that we put this as a 2x2, and try to add some color and some realism about the search for value. So if you think about your own organization, maybe you have a decentralized model around creating value from data, and this is good, right? It means you do a lot of work here, right? And you might deliver a lot of use cases at this end of the value spectrum. The difficulty for the organization is that no one business unit develops capability on its own to tackle the use cases beyond a certain complexity. So there's this sort of barrier introduced by a decentralized only model. That means lots of value will be reduced here, but there's a whole lot of value over here that no one can go after. So then organizations sometimes pivot from that. And I was part of an organization that took all of its data people from all the areas of the business, brought them all together, which was fantastic. Now we had friends and colleagues we could talk to, and it makes the opposite trade-off, where one team develops really a capability to be able to do anything, but because you've put all those people together, you've actually increased the cost of any one use case because of all the people that will now be involved. So simply by creating a team that's capable of going after much more complexity, it kind of raises the minimum value of the use case that's going to get onto their backlog, if you think about it. And then people say, oh, let's do that hub and spoke then. Let's have some central experts and some people out in the business decentralized. Let's have a compromising. Compromises are great. Let's have a central capability for the really high complexity use cases, and we'll leave it to other people to deliver the value from the lower complexity use cases. But the problem is in any organization, this does leave a huge swath of value, right? It avoids some waste, right, down in that bottom right corner, but it means there's a huge amount of value that no one is tapping because it's not anyone's job, and they have the capabilities. No one has both the capability and the mandate. Certainly the central experts have the capability to go after that, but their mandate is to deliver the most complex things. And maybe the people out in the business would love to go after some of that missed value, but they don't have the skills or the capability. And so, to put it slightly impolitely, the hub and the hub and spoke is up there in the clouds doing amazing, cool stuff, and the spokes are down in the muck, and they're both completely focused on those two things, and everyone is missing that maybe there's a bunch of, in this region, right, there's some very high value things that aren't actually that complex, right, which might be worth devoting some time compared to things that are only marginally more valuable but a lot more complex over here. So what can you do about that? So everyone likes to focus on shiny objects and big models and moonshots and crazy ideas or obvious stuff. So if you're in a consumer-facing business, you might say, oh, we have a problem with customers leaving, so let's build a churn model, right? Customer churn model. And we'll predict the likelihood that a customer is going to leave in a given time frame. And then we'll put it in the hands of the business, and then everything will be good. We will have basically solved customer churn. Hopefully, from what I was just saying for the last 5 minutes, it's clear that that's often not going to happen. And maybe the biggest value is actually by focusing on things that at first blush might be a little mundane. They might be more complex, right? They might not be low-hanging fruit, but by chipping away at those things, we might make more value realized in the long run. So that's a little bit about where data science gets stuck in my experience. Personally, and what I've seen, it gets stuck going after big, complex things that we thought were low-hanging, but as it all emerges, they weren't really that low-hanging after all, and that just erodes our ability to deliver value. Next topic, time. I said there'll be a bit of mind stretching here. Why do we ignore time? So if you look at really anyone who studies this or publishes at any consultancy, think back to your own experience. These numbers keep coming up. 80%, 75, 85%. This number keeps appearing. It appears in front of the sentence, this many AI projects don't make it to production. It's also the same rate at which digital transformations fail. And it's also the same proportion of data science work that people call unflattering names, data plumbing, data munging, data wrangling, data cleaning, data prep. Which is really interesting that this number keeps appearing, right? And it's about failure or lost opportunity. And so, we put up that number. The scarier number is the 15 to 25 of, only 15 to 25 projects end up delivering some value. Only 15 to 25% of transformations fail, and only 15 to 25% of data science work is actually the valuable stuff that we all turned up to do. And that leads to what I think is an equilibrium of low expectations, where one of those cases where XKCD comics say it much better than I can. And it's pretty funny that both of these things can feel true and both of these things can be funny at the same time, which usually means that we're locked in some kind of equilibrium where you could do something that looked like machine learning, but have actually done it manually, and people would believe that you had done it, with some high technology. That's the example on the left. And at the same time, people can come to us with a similar task, something about photos, and we just say, sorry, take 5 years. And for both of those things to be funny and true at the same time, I think it illuminates maybe why we have such high failure rates of data science projects, why we are doing so much busy work just to create value that might not even be the right things. It's because we're working on things where maybe just doing it manually would be way better. And then in the cases where there might be some value from doing something very complicated, we take this very standoffish kind of attitude to people asking the question and kind of say, well, it's well above you to understand, but it's going to take me a very long time to do that. And over time, this creates a massive problem for what we call the economics of AI. So in the early days of your initiative, you're doing those first use cases. Say you avoid the sort of rotten fruit problem. You pick some nice, feasible, valuable things. You're getting going, making lots of revenue, making lots of impact, and costs are accumulating in this linear way on this graph, but it's not really a problem. Then you sort of push into the next 20 use cases, and maybe the value is a little bit lower now because you're trying to move faster and pick off smaller projects. Of course, you've maybe harvested some of the medium hanging fruit to begin with. And then what happens is that you reach this point where the cost of the next use case plus all maintaining everything you've already built, all that technical debt exceeds the total value that you can deliver. And how quickly you reach that point is really a function of how much you let that 75-85% stat drive the work that you're doing. So if you get stuck in that equilibrium of low expectations really early, it's either a symptom or a cause of failing to solve the cost problem here and continue delivering incremental benefits. So go back to my comment about how many organizations are led by data people. Is it a surprise that when we go to our colleagues and we try to convince them of the benefits of doing something quite radically different, that they're a little bit hesitant? Because there's a high failure rate, high salaries, and high turnover of people. And if you were them, what would you do? I would say, it sounds great, but it just doesn't sound like it's for me. This goes back to my point that when we struggle to make impact on the organizations that we want to change, for very good reasons, the way we behave, the way we approach what to work on and how to work on it doesn't always make it very easy for our stakeholders to see the value that we can provide. And no amount of lecturing them on it is going to change their minds. So what I'm hinting here is that it's really very, very easy to get stuck on complex, low-value problems that at the outset, they looked easy and high value when you started off. Here's some awkward questions you can ask yourselves to kick yourselves out of this alternative space-time continuum that data science can end up in, where we're sort of off in some part of the organization, paid quite a lot of money to do something that no one really understands the value of. So a question to ask is, if our long-run research projects that don't seem to get any traction, is there really a business challenge that we're solving? Maybe we should kill that project. Even if our model was in production tomorrow, from our perspective, how much business change would be required for the organization to actually use it differently? So it's not enough to have a beautiful MLOps pipeline generating a wonderful, high-performing API if no website calls your API or no one uses the insight that you can generate. You kind of just wasted everyone's time and money. And to solve this at a macro level, it's a really good idea to understand who owns time in your organization. Is it product? Is it projects? Does no one own time? And how do you align your time scale to their time scale so that you can deliver things as quickly as they need when they need things delivered quickly, but also invest the way they do in longer term change? A couple of final thoughts on what we can change about ourselves. So some people think that innovation, let's call innovation finding the dark blue square there in a sea of potentially average ideas. Some people think it comes from individuals, execs, and lone geniuses toiling away and having that eureka moment. Some people think that you have an innovation lab and you protect them from the business. And that's sadly where a lot of AI data science teams end up, away from the business. And what we believe at Dataiku, and there's plenty of research to back up this perspective, that more perspectives, a diverse bunch of people collaborating freely, are much more likely on average to find that innovation. There'll always be cases where individuals do better, but on average, in the long run, many people's perspectives will lead to greater benefit. So if you think about one mental model to take away, if you're a data science leader and you're intrigued by what I've said, you've really just got two jobs. One is spin the red gear as fast as you can on experimentation. And that means low entry barriers, automation of busy work. If most of your project time is setting up your project environment, you're not spinning the red wheel fast enough. And never, ever, ever call your models pets, because it's going to be hard to kill them off if they don't bear fruit. And the more you generate good ideas to test, and the more you discard the bad ideas, the fruit already fallen off the tree that you really shouldn't have bitten, but you did anyway, the faster you can get rid of that and focus on the good ideas, the more you can invest in turning this big, complicated, costly, organizational politics, nasty green wheel, because that's where the value is created. But if you experiment faster, you will be able to step into organization time and make those efforts. And that's just mostly managing other people's work, which you cannot do alone. So we write about this, we think about this a lot at Dataiku. You can contact me there. You can read more about our take on the economics of AI. I think I've finished exactly on 20 minutes, so there may not be any questions. or time for any questions. If we've got any more minutes, we can hang around and throw some questions in the chat there. I'll be here. Thank you, Vadim, for saying awesome presentation. I appreciate the feedback.